Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. This is We On Wild as One. We are glad you're watching. I'm Eric Njoka. The headlines. India announces a slew of countermeasures in response to the Pahalgam attack, suspends entry of Pakistani nationals to India and cancels their visas. Also shuts the Attari-Wagah border crossing. Responding to India's actions, reports say Pakistan is likely to invoke reciprocal measures of naming Indian naval, defence and military attachés persona non grata. Amid intense cordon and search operations in Jammu and Kashmir for the killers of Pahalgam, Anantnag police announced cash reward of 2 million rupees for information on their whereabouts. President Donald Trump says the US will, quote, fair deal with China. This after sources says the White House is considering lowering tariffs to between 50 and 65%. US President Trump says a deal on halting the Ukraine war was very close. He hits out at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky over his refusal to formally cede Crimea to Russia, blames Zelensky for inflammatory statements that block ceasefire moves. Mortal remains of Pope Francis taken to St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican, where they will lie in state till his funeral on Saturday. Top-world dignitaries, including US President Donald Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, will attend. And the IPL pays tribute to the victims of the Pahalgam attack. Sunrisers Hyderabad and Mumbai Indian players wear black armbands and hold a minute of silence before their match.
First, we begin with that wildfire that exploded overnight in New Jersey. Here's a live look from our Philadelphia station WPVI's helicopter. Trevor Auld is on the scene in Ocean County, New Jersey. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, George. This really became a mess overnight. Thousands of people evacuated and some major highways shut down. Let's show you that look up above again from our station WPVI in Philadelphia. You can still see some active flames this morning and really tons of smoke. A lot of the visibility is really messy this morning. And this was originally thought, the Jones Road fire, to threaten just a dozen structures, and then it erupted to threatening well over 1,000.
Overnight, a raging wildfire tearing through New Jersey.
We're going to have 3 buildings or 4 buildings affected. Are we making a stand?
Thousands of residents forced to evacuate in the night.
I hope that I have a home to return back to.
The Jones Road fire quickly exploding in size, swallowing at least 8,500 acres, and it's only 10% contained. Firefighters battling the blaze, trying to save this building.
We're going to lose this.
Flames closing in around them, threatening this industrial area. New Jersey Central Power and Light cutting electricity to 25,000 customers in an effort to protect firefighters. Parts of the Garden State Parkway shut down, smoke obscuring the roadway, and more than 1,300 buildings threatened, including a former nuclear plant.
Smoke and everything was right in my backyard. Everything was covered with black ashes.
New Jersey Forest Fire Service attacking the blaze from the ground and the air.
As the day progressed, it was kind of scary. Should you leave? Should you stay?
Michael Farah looking on in horror as smoke filled the sky, the flames closing in on his neighborhood.
First, of course, your safety, but what are you going to take with you? Birth certificates, passports. It's just a very eerie feeling.
And we did learn just moments ago that those evacuation orders have been lifted. That's positive news, but the power remains out. So a big problem this morning is a lot of intersections like this one don't have functioning traffic lights. You can see the cop cars that are monitoring this intersection, and it's unclear when that power is going to be restored. Robin?
That is a major issue, Trevor. Thank you. We're going to bring in Ginger, who is back tracking the smoke in the wind.
Yes, and the smoke by tonight into tomorrow morning, we could be feeling and seeing all the way up here. So let's talk about what's going to go down. And it starts with drought. People have a lot of questions. Are we in drought? There is severe drought from central Pennsylvania and eastern Pennsylvania back to Washington, D.C. A couple of pockets in New Jersey, but south and north of where the fire is, they're actually not in drought where the fire is. However, the New Jersey Fire Forest Service has them at a level 3 out of 5, which they call high, for the fuels in the forest being very dry. So they do say that any fire start could be a bad deal. Now, the winds are a big deal because they're going to shift from north, with gusts around 17 now, to south. And that's where we're going to start inviting some of that smoke up here. So let's do the smoke forecast. You can see it start to pool up by 11 p.m. tonight. Very highly populated areas, including western Long Island and New York City. That's going to be through the day tomorrow and even tomorrow night.
A lot to come. Okay, Ginger, thanks very much.
Wildfire in New Jersey has forced residents to evacuate the area and shut down a stretch of a major highway. According to New Jersey Forest Fire Service, over 3,000 residents have been evacuated from the Jones Road fire in Ocean County.
Sallanıyor. Allah'ım sen yardımcı ol yarabbim. Sallanıyor. Sakin, tamam sakin. Sakin ol. Bir yerlere götürür abi. Ne oldu? Bayağı oldu. Deprem oldu. Ben hissettim de. Ben dedim acaba bir yer mi oynadı? Deprem mi oldu? Evet. Ne oldu kızım?
damage is unprecedented in its scale. 84% of the world's coral reefs are currently experiencing a deadly bleaching episode, an international group of scientists said on Wednesday. The reason? Increasingly warm ocean water due to climate change.
We've just reached 1.5 degrees in the ocean, and you see the repercussions in this 2023, 2024 bleaching event, and it's unprecedented. And, you know, that's what 1.5, if that's what 1.5 looks like, you know, and we're not even going to make 2 degrees at the current trajectories. It's very alarming. So I think people really need to recognize what they're doing, you know, by the inaction. It's the kiss of death for coral reefs.
Coral bleaching occurs when the algae that give their colors to coral and feed them release toxins due to overly warm conditions. The coral then expel them and turn white, making them more likely to starve and die.
We're looking at something that's completely changing the face of our planet and the ability of our oceans to sustain lives and livelihoods.
Coral reefs are crucial for ocean biodiversity, coastline protection and seafood production. Yet without remedies for the root causes of climate change, bleaching is likely to continue and devastate even more parts of the ocean.
This latest report that's compiled from around the globe and showing that 84% of the coral reefs have been affected by this bleaching event is just unparalleled. You know, each mass bleaching event has gotten worse, and I think it will continue to do so. Coral reefs aren't going to last 50 years. At the rate we're going, they're not going to make it anywhere close to 50 years into the future.
We're seeing forecasts that temperatures are going to continue to stay high. There's no reason that they will be dropping down. That heat stress is what causes corals to bleach, and if it continues long enough or is severe enough, causes corals to die. We just may never see the heat stress that causes bleaching dropping below the threshold that triggers a global event. So this may be the last one. The best way to protect coral reefs is to address the root cause of climate change. And that means reducing the emissions, the human emissions that are mostly from burning of fossil fuels. Everything else is looking more like a Band-Aid rather than a solution.
8 artificial food dyes will be phased out of the U.S. food and drug supply by the end of 2026. The announcement came Tuesday from FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary speaking at a press event with HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C.
These steps that we are taking means that the FDA is effectively removing all petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply.
Makary says the synthetic dyes are most commonly found in brightly colored fun foods like candy, cereal, snacks, and sports drinks. They're asking companies to begin transitioning to natural alternatives like beet juice, carrot juice, and watermelon juice. 2 dyes not currently in production will be revoked: Citrus Red No. 2 and Orange B. 6 more artificial dyes will be eliminated from the U.S. food supply: red dye No. 40, yellow dyes 5 and 6, blue dyes 1 and 2, and green dye No. 3. The agency is also pushing for the early removal of red dye No. 3. Banned earlier this year from food and drinks due to potential cancer risks, Red 3 is currently set to be phased out of foods by 2027 and medications by 2028. Makary says the FDA will work to eliminate it even sooner. To support the transition, the FDA will authorize 4 new natural color additives in the coming weeks and is accelerating the review of others. Makary cited multiple health concerns Tuesday, especially for children.
41% of children have at least one health condition, and 1 in 5 are on medication. The answer is not more Ozempic, more ADHD medication, and more antidepressants.
While this ban isn't a cure-all, he says it is an important step in addressing the childhood health crisis. This comes as the Texas Attorney General investigates Kellogg for continuing to use artificial dyes in its U.S. cereals, even though the same dyes have been removed from products sold in Canada and Europe. A 2022 meta-analysis published in Environmental Health found a link between synthetic dyes and hyperactivity in children. And a 2021 report from the California EPA found over half of 25 studies reviewed showed a connection between artificial dyes and behavioral issues. McCary emphasized that switching to natural dyes won't raise food prices, pointing to other countries that have already made that transition. However, multiple sources within the commercial food industry maintain that a shift to natural food coloring would lead to higher prices, possibly disrupting certain supply chains, while manufacturers retool to comply with federal regulation.
We're going to start informing Americans about what they're eating. We're going to try to work with Congress and the White House to make sure that we have adequate labeling.
McCary called the decades-long use of synthetic dyes, quote, one of the largest uncontrolled scientific experiments on children. He described the FDA's move as a step toward restoring public trust in food safety regulations.
The IMF has warned that the fallout from U.S. tariff hikes could worsen an already fragile global economy. The international lender on Tuesday downgraded its global economic growth projections. It now forecasts global growth to average 2.8% for 2025, a 0.5% reduction from its January estimate.
As you have this uncertainty about tariffs and trade relations, some of these frictions could get amplified along the supply chains. You don't know if your suppliers are going to be there. You don't know if your customers are going to be there. The supply chain may have to be reoriented. That injects another layer of uncertainty to the situation that's already quite complex.
U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs have upended markets and increased volatility. While they have been suspended for many major economies, the 145% duty on China is still in place.
Sri Lanka's economy is showing signs of life after its worst financial crisis in history, but the World Bank has warned that behind the numbers, millions are still suffering. A new report says that while the country has started to recover, nearly 1 in 4 Sri Lankans still remain trapped in poverty. In 2024, the South Asian country recorded a 5% growth, marking Sri Lanka's first year of economic expansion since the devastating 2022 debt default. Despite the rebound, over 2.4, that is over 24.5% of the country's population is still living in poverty, surviving on less than $3.65 a day. Job opportunities are scarce, forcing many to seek work overseas. The World Bank projects that growth could moderate in 2025 to 3.5%, partly due to global trade uncertainties triggered by the sharp increase in U.S. tariffs. Early this month, U.S. President Donald Trump announced a staggering 44% reciprocal tariff on the island nation. The United States is Sri Lanka's largest single market, accounting for almost a quarter of its $12 billion in merchandise exports. The tariffs could hit key industries and plunge Sri Lanka into an economic crisis.
I would consider it serious because we are still at the tail end of the stabilization process, and our debt repayment will start in 2028, and the apparel industry, the rubber industry and some of the agricultural products were the main categories that we were looking for expanding. And out of our exports, about 20% to 25% is for the US markets. So at the early stages, having this impact of 44% tariff on most of these products is definitely going to impact the growth of those sectors so as for our exports, which will impact our dollar inflow. So I would rate it quite serious.
तो जब घोड़ा वाला के साथ बातचीत हो रहा था तो तभी सडनली भागचल हुआ, दौड़ हुआ, तो हम लोग पैनिक हो गए थे। तो उसी समय हमारे बगल में एक रेस्टोरेंट था, उसके मालिक हम 6 बंदे थे, हम 6 बंदे को एकदम अंदर घुसा लिया, घुसा के बाद दरवाज़ा लॉक एंड की कर दिया।
I'm Tal Spungian, editor of JPost.com. Earlier on Monday, head of Israel's security agency, the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar, submitted his affidavit to the High Court of Justice against his dismissal by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In his affidavit, Bar claimed that Netanyahu asked the Shin Bet to spy on and take action against Israeli civilians who took part in protests against the government. Another allegation claimed in Bar's affidavit says that Netanyahu told the Shin Bet chief that in the case of a constitutional crisis, the Shin Bet would be expected to take the side of the prime minister and the government instead of the Supreme Courts. Netanyahu's office rejected Bar's claims later on Monday, saying that it would publish a complete rebuttal of the claims later that day. The claims made by Bar mark another serious escalation in tensions between the government and the Shin Bet. Bar's claims, if true, pose serious questions into Netanyahu's conduct as prime minister and his attempted abuse of the powers of the security agency.
Last year, almost all defense companies accomplished objectives of the state defense order in full, meeting quality and deadlines, with some types of weapons ahead of schedule. For example, production of weapons, communication, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare systems more than doubled. The troops received more than 4,000 armored vehicles and 180 combat aircraft and helicopters. More than 1.5 million drones of various types have also been delivered, with about 4,000 FPV drones operated through a VR system being sent to the front line every day. I know perfectly well, and many of you here at our meeting today know as well as I do, that there is still a shortage of these weapons. I know about the efforts that are being made by the Defense Ministry, by the Minister, and by industry. There are plans in place and the work is ongoing every day. I am confident that all plans to increase production of the relevant equipment, in this case these drones, will certainly be implemented. Those at the contact line are waiting for them. They are actually one of the biggest factors in combat success today. I would like to point out that today our experience in conducting a special military operation, both in terms of tactics and weapons development, is being studied, without any exaggeration, by all armies of the world, by the leaders of global arms industries and high-tech companies. But we need to be one step ahead, as we have repeatedly done recently and, I am sure, will continue to do in the future. And we should certainly take into account global trends in military technology development as much as possible. In other words, we should predict and understand what the potential armed conflicts in the future may be. Because the future is rapidly approaching. Everything is developing faster and faster. The speed of these changes is increasing. It is also important to accelerate the production of robotic systems for various purposes and different locations. Special attention should be paid to uncrewed boats and other marine systems. The current task is to develop laser systems capable of engaging various targets, in particular drones. And in the future, other military equipment, aircraft, missiles, and so on and so forth. We have certain experience in this area. We already have produced such systems, but we need to move faster in these most advanced, popular, and promising areas. We should definitely increase the production and usage of secure domestic software products and AI developments, and to apply them in integrated automated military command and control systems. We all talk about artificial intelligence. It has become popular. No meeting in any sector can do without it. But you must understand that, actually, everyone understands that the potential of artificial intelligence is enormous. And whoever starts to master these technologies faster, in this case in the military, will have a huge advantage on the battlefield. We should never forget that. We also have other ideas, other developments. We will talk about them later. Now let us get to work as planned.